This woman used to be a journalist in the country of Equatorial Guinea, but she was later rumored to have had a secret love affair with Baltasar. However, it ended badly. Listen to how it happened.
My name is Clarice. For almost 5 years, I worked as a journalist at one of Equatorial Guinea's major media houses, Radio Malabo News. My husband Philemon was a real estate agent, a middleman for some of the biggest property deals in Malabo. We had what most people would call a perfect marriage, a cozy apartment near the presidential palace, a couple of imported cars, and frequent vacations to Bata and Sao Tome. But like most things that look perfect from the outside, ours was already cracking beneath the surface. Philemon was a good man in many ways, ambitious, charming, and well-connected, but he was obsessed with his work. He spent more time chasing clients, managing properties, and making shady deals under the table than he did being present with me. Over time, I began to feel invisible in my own home. That's when I met Baltasar in Gonga. It was supposed to be just another routine assignment. The National Financial Investigation Agency had made a series of high-profile arrests for corruption and tax evasion. I was sent to cover a press briefing where Baltasar, the head of the agency, was expected to speak. Everyone knew of him. He was young for such a powerful role, barely in his 40s, and carried himself with a dangerous kind of charisma that instantly pulled attention toward him. When he stepped up to the podium, I swear the entire room leaned in closer. After the briefing, while other journalists swarmed around his aides, I hung back, studying him. Somehow, his eyes found mine across the crowd. He nodded once, a barely noticeable gesture, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. Later that evening, to my surprise, I received a direct message on Twitter from an anonymous account. It simply read, "You asked good questions today. Not many dare to ask what you did." I knew immediately who it was. It started innocently enough. We began exchanging messages at first about politics, corruption in the oil sector, secret deals that no one dared publish. But as the days turned into weeks, the conversations turned personal. He asked about my dreams, my frustrations with the media house's censorship, my loneliness at home. He listened in a way Philemon hadn't in years. Baltasar invited me to a private meeting under the guise of an off-the-record interview. It was in a high-end hotel by the sea, the kind of place only diplomats and tycoons could afford. I should have known better. I told myself it was for work, that I needed the inside scoop, but deep down I knew I wanted to go. That night, everything changed. I remember standing at the window, looking out over the lights of Malabo, the humid air brushing against the silk of the hotel curtains. Baltasar stood close behind me. There was no pretense anymore, no distance. I turned around, and before either of us could say anything, he kissed me. It was wrong. It was electric. And I didn't stop him. We fell into each other like two people drowning. For months afterward, we carried on in secret. Sometimes it was in hidden beach houses owned by government officials, other times, it was late-night rendezvous in the darkened halls of political events. Baltasar showed me a world I had only ever heard about in whispers: the hidden wealth, the underground power struggles, the dangerous game of survival among the elite. At first, it felt thrilling. Philemon barely noticed. He was too busy chasing commissions and cutting deals. But as my affair deepened, so did my guilt. I watched my husband working late into the night to build a future for us, unaware that I was slipping away, piece by piece, into another man's arms. The turning point came when Baltasar offered me something more: a position within the agency itself, disguised as a media consultant. It would have meant leaving journalism behind and diving deeper into a world of shadows and lies. For the first time, I hesitated. Was I ready to give up everything for a man whose loyalty belonged not to me, but to his own ambitions? One night, Philemon found a message I had carelessly left open on my laptop. It wasn't explicit, but it was enough. His face, the hurt, the disbelief will haunt me forever. He didn't shout. He didn't hit me. He simply packed a small bag, took his car keys, and left. I never saw him again. After that, I tried to dive fully into Baltasar's world, but it was too late. The magic between us began to fade. Without the secrecy, without the thrill of betrayal, we were just two people who needed different things. He moved on to another consultant within months. As for me, I was left standing alone, a ghost of the woman I once was. My career at Radio Malabo News ended in disgrace. Whispers about my affair spread quickly. Friends who once cheered me on now crossed the street to avoid me. Looking back, I ask myself, was it worth it? For a few stolen months of passion and excitement, I lost a husband who loved me, a career I had built from scratch, and a piece of my own soul. I guess that's what betrayal does. It doesn't just destroy the ones you love, it destroys you too. In the beginning, before everything unraveled, there was a recklessness in me that I can barely recognize now. Philemon worked long hours, often visiting distant construction sites or taking overnight trips to neighboring towns to close property deals. Our apartment, a sleek, modern space with glass walls and cold marble floors, often sat empty for hours at a time. That's when I started inviting Baltasar over. It began innocently enough. A casual conversation turned into a shared glass of wine, the glass of wine turned into a stolen kiss, and before long, my home, the one Philemon and I had built together, became the stage for my betrayal. Baltasar never came during the day. He preferred the dusky hours of late afternoon, when the sunlight turned golden and poured through the living room windows like spilled honey. I would spend hours preparing, pretending it was just another normal evening, while inside, I was trembling with anticipation. I would light candles, not too many, just enough to make the space glow warmly. I told myself it was simply to create a relaxing mood after work, in case Philemon asked. But really, it was for Baltasar. I would put on soft music, something low and rhythmic, almost tribal, blending with the city sounds outside. I wore the kind of dresses I rarely wore for my husband, thin, silky, almost slipping off my body with every step. The mood when Baltasar arrived was always the same, thick with tension. He never came with flowers or gifts. No romantic pretense. His presence alone was enough. He would step inside, his body large and commanding, and close the door behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo through the apartment. For a few moments, we would just stand there, the distance between us crackling. I would pour us drinks, whiskey for him, red wine for me, but more often than not, we barely touched them. It was as if the entire house shifted when he was inside. My heart would pound so loudly I was sure the neighbors could hear it. He liked to walk through the apartment, running his fingers lightly along the counters, the bookshelves, the picture frames. He once posed in front of a photo of Philemon and me at the beach, laughing with arms around each other. I remember the way his lips curled into a slight, mocking smile before he turned back to me and pulled me into his arms. We were reckless. Dangerous. We would make love in the living room, on the kitchen counter, even once shamefully in the very bed I shared with Philemon. Every time, afterward, I would sit wrapped in a sheet, watching Baltasar dress silently, a cigarette dangling from his lips, knowing full well how wrong it all was. And yet, a part of me felt more alive during those stolen moments than I ever had before. There was an unspoken rule between us: never stay too long, never leave traces. Baltasar was meticulous. Wiping down surfaces, smoothing back the sheets, ensuring no stray hair or perfume scent betrayed him. I became just as careful, spritzing the apartment with Philemon's favorite cologne before he returned, laundering the bed sheets obsessively, throwing away empty wine bottles deep in the communal dumpsters. But no matter how careful we were, the air inside the house began to change. It grew thicker, heavier with secrets. Sometimes I caught Philemon frowning as he stepped inside, sniffing the air, sensing something off but unable to put his finger on it. I told myself it was just guilt playing tricks on me. that I could control it. But the truth was, the moment I opened that door for Baltasar the first time, everything was already set into motion, a slow, inevitable collapse that not even the greatest lies could stop. Even now, after everything, I can still hear his voice when I close my eyes. Baltasar had this way of speaking low, rough, almost like a growl, as if the words came straight from his chest rather than his mouth. When he kissed me, he didn't rush. He would press his lips to mine slowly, deliberately, as if he had all the time in the world. And between kisses, he would whisper things that made my skin burn and my heart race. I remember how he used to lean in close, his hand cradling the back of my neck, and mama. Marem, Clarice Marem. Iris mia aura. Look at me, Clarice, you're mine now. And I would look into his dark eyes and forget everything else, my marriage, my guilt, even my own name sometimes. Sometimes, just as his lips brushed against my jaw, he would whisper. Nodia tii vie atoka como yo nodia vie akonachate como yo tii kanosko. No one will touch you like I do, no one will ever know you the way I know you. Other times, when he pulled me onto his lap, his mouth trailing kisses down my collarbone, he would murmur. Iris mi pequeño secreto, nuestro pequeño incendio. You're my little secret, our little fire. He spoke those words with a kind of reverence, like I was something forbidden, something sacred and dangerous at once. And then there were times, the most dangerous times, when he would kiss me hard, pinning me against the wall, and growl into my ear. Diberias tena mido da quanto te quiero ahora. You should be afraid of how much I want you now. But I wasn't afraid. I was drunk on it, on him, every word, every kiss binding me tighter into something I wouldn't be able to escape from. It was those words, whispered against my skin, that made it impossible for me to pull away, even when my conscience screamed at me to stop. It was those words that sealed my fate long before Philemon ever found out. It wasn't always at my apartment. As the affair grew deeper, riskier, Baltasar and I learned to be even more careful, and somehow, the danger only made it sweeter. Sometimes, we couldn't wait for long nights or quiet apartments. Sometimes we needed each other immediately, like an addiction that couldn't be postponed. So we found hidden places all over Malabo. There was an abandoned construction site near the new port, a place of rusted cranes and half-finished buildings. Late at night, when the workers were long gone and the moon hung heavy in the sky, we would drive there separately. I would park my old black SUV behind a pile of stacked concrete blocks. Baltasar would pull up minutes later in his armored sedan, headlights cutting briefly through the darkness before he killed the engine. I remember the way my heart would pound as I watched his silhouette walking toward me, confident, dangerous, irresistible. He would yank open the car door, pull me into him, and kiss me with a hunger that made me dizzy. Sometimes he would whisper against my mouth, "Sabes que estoy loco por ti." Do you know I'm crazy about you? Other nights, when the moonlight caught his face just right, he looked almost wild. Like a man losing a battle he no longer cared to win. There were other places too. An overgrown field behind an old Catholic church where no one went anymore except stray dogs and desperate lovers. We once spent nearly an hour there, just kissing and talking and breathing each other in, as the night wrapped around us like a secret. A dirt road outside Beni, surrounded by thick jungle trees. We used to laugh at how reckless it was, how one wrong move and we could be caught by soldiers on patrol. But that danger, that thin line between freedom and destruction, it made every kiss sharper, every touch heavier. In the cramped space of my car, it wasn't about sex most of the time. It was about closeness. Touching. Whispering. Kissing until our lips were swollen, our clothes wrinkled, our minds drowning in each other. Sometimes he would hold my face in his hands, brush a strand of hair behind my ear, and say, "Te necesito más de lo que necesito el air, Clarice. I need you more than I need air, Clarice." And I would believe him. Every time. We would part reluctantly, both of us carrying the taste of the other on our lips, our hands trembling slightly as we drove away into separate darknesses. Each kiss was a promise, a dangerous one. Each hidden meeting wove us tighter together, and yet, somehow, we both knew we were speeding toward a cliff we could not avoid. But in those moments, in those dark places, we didn't care. All that mattered was the heat between us. The stolen kisses. The thrill of knowing the world outside could tear us apart at any second and still choosing each other anyway. It was a humid night in June. The air was thick with the smell of rain that hadn't yet fallen, and the stars above Malabo looked blurry through the heavy clouds. I had told Philemon that I was working late on a story. He barely looked up from his laptop as I kissed his forehead goodbye. I drove, heart pounding, not to the office but to one of our favorite hidden places, a dirt road just past Beni, swallowed by thick forest on both sides. Baltasar was already there, leaning against his black sedan, arms crossed over his chest, his face lit only by the dull glow of a cigarette. The moment I stepped out of my car, he crushed the cigarette under his boot and crossed the space between us in 2 strides. His mouth was on mine before I could even say a word. Rough. Hungry. Desperate. His hand slid into my hair, tugging gently, pulling me closer until I could feel the steady, wild beat of his heart against my chest. We kissed like we hadn't seen each other in years, not just days. At some point, without thinking, I whispered against his lips. "Llévame contigo. Take me with you." Baltasar froze. For a long second, he just stared at me, breathing heavily. His hands, which had been roaming over my body with fierce urgency, stilled. "Estás segura?" he murmured, his forehead resting against mine. "Are you sure?" I wasn't sure. Not really. But in that moment, standing there in the thick, wet darkness, with the scent of earth and danger all around us, I thought I was. "No puedo más," I whispered. "I can't do this anymore. No puedo volver a esa casa vieja, a esa vida que ya no quiero. I can't go back to that empty house, to that life I don't want anymore." Baltasar kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, as if trying to pour all his answers into me through his mouth. When he pulled away, his hands cradled my face tenderly, his thumb brushing the corner of my lips. "Te quiero, Clarice," he said, a voice rough with emotion. "I want you, Clarice. Pero no quiero destruirte. But I don't want to destroy you." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I was already destroyed. He held me there, under the heavy sky, for what felt like hours, his arms wrapped around me like a shield against the world. And for a few heartbeats, I believed that if we just stayed there, in that small cocoon of darkness and stolen love, everything would somehow be okay. But eventually, reality crept back in. Baltasar kissed the top of my head, helped me back into my car, and stood watching as I drove away, headlights cutting through the blackness, tears blurring my vision. I almost turned back. I almost abandoned everything that night. Philemon, my career, my name, just to belong fully to him. But I didn't. And maybe that was the real tragedy. That I chose to go back to my empty life, my empty marriage, pretending for a little while longer that I could have both. When in truth, I was losing everything, including myself, one kiss, one lie, one stolen night at a time. Looking back, I realize now that Baltasar was a man of walls he built so high and so thick around himself that not even I, with all the love and longing between us, could break them down. He never wanted me to know much about his wife. I knew she existed, of course, the ring he sometimes forgot to remove, the hurried glances at his phone when a message came through late at night. But every time I even touched the subject, even gently, his face would harden. His whole body would shift subtly away from me, as if protecting some private part of himself. He would say things like, "No preguntes lo que no quieres saber, Clarice. Don't ask what you don't really want to know, Clarice." Or worse, "Ella no importa. Solo importa lo que tenemos tú y yo. She doesn't matter. Only what you and I have matters." And in my heart, I knew it wasn't about protecting me. It was about protecting himself. Baltasar was a man who needed to control the parts of himself that he showed to the world, even to me, the woman he claimed to love beyond reason. Yet at the same time he was ferociously jealous of Philemon. It didn't make sense at first. Baltasar knew I was married. We had crossed that line together. And still, there was a dark, burning anger in him whenever I mentioned Philemon, even by accident. A way his jaw would clench, his eyes turning sharp and cold. If I ever said something simple like, Philemon is out of town again, Baltasar would mutter, "De Jolo fuera de esta conversation." Leave him out of this conversation. Or worse, sometimes after kissing me hard until my lips were bruised, he would growl, "El también lo besas así? Do you kiss him like this too?" He hated the idea of me belonging to anyone but him, even though he couldn't or wouldn't give me the same complete belonging in return. I think the truth is this. Baltasar saw me as his completely and entirely, even if he couldn't or wouldn't offer me the same totality. He didn't want me asking about his wife because he wanted our world, our stolen world, to feel pure, untouched by any other life. But he also couldn't stand the thought that someone else might still have a piece of me, even if that someone was my own husband. Baltasar's love was selfish while destructive. It was the kind of love that wanted to possess more than it wanted to nurture. And for a long time, I was willing to be possessed. I mistook that hunger for something real. I mistook it for something safe. My biggest regret is that I lost myself. Not just the marriage, not just my career, not even the love I thought I had with Baltasar. I lost who I was. I let a man who could never fully love me the way I deserved consume me. I let myself be reduced to someone who lived for hidden kisses, stolen nights, and whispered promises that were never meant to be kept. I thought I was being brave, following passion, chasing something real, but the truth is, I was running from loneliness, from boredom, from my own fears that my life had become too small, too ordinary. And worst of all, I had Philemon, a man who, for all his flaws, trusted me. I betrayed the home we built together. I made 1,000 small choices that led to one big disaster, thinking each time, just one more lie, just one more kiss, then I'll stop. But lies grow roots. They take hold deeper than you expect. Now, when I think back on those nights in the hidden fields, the abandoned construction sites, the desperate embraces in the back seats of cars, I don't just remember the heat and the thrill. I also remember the emptiness that followed. The cold, lonely silences after Baltasar left. The way I had to look into Philemon's trusting eyes and pretend I was still the woman he married. My real regret is that I wasn't brave enough to walk away from either man and stand on my own. Because maybe love shouldn't feel like drowning. Maybe love shouldn't feel like a secret you have to bury deeper every day. I thought Baltasar was saving me from a life of boredom. But in the end, I was just trading one kind of prison for another. One built not of marble floors and glass walls, but of guilt, lies, and broken promises. And that is a regret I will carry for the rest of my life.